Let's talk about this common stressor concern that teachers have where they say, well, I have multiple proficiency levels in the same language class. How can I make the curriculum fit for all of them? How do I keep them all engaged? How do I keep them all challenged? So first of all, when I'm hearing this question, I know for sure that we have not fully implemented project-based language immersion yet because this problem is much, much more simple. It's very reduced. It becomes a very small little challenge that I'm going to address now within project-based learning, but project-based learning eliminates most of this naturally. First of all, when we are truly implementing project-based learning, meaning we have a true public product outcome for our unit, and every single lesson builds up to that through activities that are communicatively planned using the 5 Fs, um, that does two things. It makes what we're doing challenging and interesting, even if you're too far advanced for what we're specifically learning. What we're doing is still interesting. And so we don't have a lot of issues with the more proficient students becoming bored or becoming disengaged or discrediting what we're doing because there's a genuine human interest in what we're doing, even if the language isn't hard. They may quietly realize over time, like this unit has all been reviewed for me, and we do want to address that, and I'll get to that. But it's not boring or, insulting to anyone to engage in these activities because the activities are worthwhile and interesting in and of themselves. They would be worthwhile and interesting even if the people were fluent speakers because they're just interesting activities to do in the language. They are valuable in and of themselves, and real world skills are being acquired through the medium of the language. So there's not an instant boredom or rebellion from people who are more proficient. You also, at the same time, are addressing the issue of access for those who are less proficient. Not that this disappears as a challenge. Of course, it can be a challenge. But because each lesson is activity based and because you are properly applying your 5 Fs in planning each of your lessons, every student is able to participate in at least some aspect of the activity that's going on right now. They may be left with challenges and questions that more advanced students don't have. They've already had them answered. Like they may not understand why we're saying the phrase that we're saying this way because they're not familiar with that grammatical form yet. But they understand that we're saying it this way in order to play this game or do this project or have this conversation. So there's always a way that they can participate. They're not completely left out. They certainly may feel that they are behind others, and we're going to address that, but it's not that they are completely unable to participate because how to do the activity is being taught in the same lesson as doing the activity. So all they have to do is pay attention, they engage, there's enough practice that they're able to achieve some level of participation in the activity, even if it's challenging for them and they're maybe not sure why the language is being used in the form it's being used because those forms are beyond them, but they're not unable to participate. There's a huge range of proficiency levels that can engage in an activity, and there's a huge range of real world skills that are involved in genuine, authentic communicative activities that are interesting, even if the language isn't a challenge. So if you think about it, when you ask your child or your nephew, for example, what sport they prefer, or you ask your niece whether, she's the best one on the team or who's the best one on her team or what does she like about that sport or whatever. You're not using any challenging language. I mean, if you're speaking in your L1, it's really easy for you to communicate all of that information. It's really basic stuff. Your child or your niece or nephew also knows all those words. There's nothing technical or linguistically challenging about it. It's still an interesting conversation though, because you're just getting to know someone that you actually care about. It's an interesting topic for you. You'd like to know the answer. You don't disengage in real life because I already know all the words in this conversation. I already know how to use this grammatical form. So if you're having a lot of disengagement or pushback about it's too easy, then it's not authentic enough. And if you're having a lot of disengagement because it's too hard, then you haven't followed the activity-based lesson template with enough fidelity, because some aspect that could have helped those less proficient learners participate in these activities is missing, is insufficient. Now, that being said, even if you are fully implementing authentic projects and even if you are fully structuring your lessons around the 5 Fs, you can, of course, see that a unit can be really challenging for some learners and not really challenging for other learners. And over time, the learners notice that as well. So there are basically 4 ways that I adjust according to those observations. Before I say those 4 ways, I just want to note that these are based on empirical observations that I make, not on self-reports. What do I mean by that? I mean, if I actually see the student able to make these phrases and able to do these communicative interactions really easily without error, then I know that they have mastered them, and I may see them adding things or, being more creative with their language in a way that shows me that they are beyond this level. Then I know that they're beyond this level. I don't know that they're beyond this level because they tell me that they're beyond this level. Unfortunately, one of the realities that we deal with as language teachers is that people are universally terrible at self-assessing their own proficiency. And even on micro levels of do you already know this lesson or not, it's very common, unfortunately, to have learners say, yeah, 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 we know this, and then immediately not be able to perform it in a scenario, to immediately try to have the conversation with them and they do it wrong or they can't figure it out. Very, very common. And that's because we still have our hangover from our teacher-centered approach, which is to say, yes, we know this usually means, yes, our teacher covered this. This has been mentioned to us before. It seems like it's been mentioned to us before. That's not the same as, yes, I have mastered this and I can use it spontaneously in an authentic interaction. So there is often a gap. I don't base my adjustment of my unit or my lessons on self-assessment. I base them on empirical observations because we do enough constant communicating in my classroom that I'm constantly able to formatively assess my learners. And by the same token, there's a less common, less universal phenomenon, but very real, of sort of learned helplessness that can come from less than ideal school experiences where a learner will just keep saying, this is too hard, I don't know this, because they don't feel 100% confidence with it, but the source of their lack of confidence sometimes isn't actual mastery. Sometimes they actually do know this, or it's not that challenging. It's just slightly above where they are. It's a good level for them. But it's a whole big long conversation, but from other schooling experiences, they've learned to try to get out of challenging themselves by saying, well, I don't know. I don't know. I can't do it. Can you do it for me? I can't do it. So just kind of notice, like on both ends of the spectrum, is there a little bit of learned helplessness going on here, or is there maybe self over assessment, sur-assessment, um, and base your adjustment of a unit or a lesson on your empirical observations. If you're thinking, well, I don't have time to observe every student, then not enough authentic communication is happening in your classroom, because authentic communication should be happening every day in every lesson. Every student should be doing authentic communication. So within a day or two, you should easily have circulated and heard the level of mastery of every student. You might not have the full, you do not, of course, have the full picture, but a general sense of how challenging this unit's focal phrases are for them is gettable in 2, maybe 3 class periods. So then we're left with the fact that some students are ready for something more challenging than what's in this unit, and some students are going to be learning a lot of new things in this unit and not quite ready for the full scope of it. So the 4 ways that I adjust a unit once I've fully implemented it and we're down to these small challenges is, of course, speed. If we want to keep the group pretty much progressing all together, but there is a large enough percentage, so I'm going to say like 65% or more of the students who have mostly mastered this is mostly review for them. I can go a little bit faster, do a little bit less review, but I still follow the five F's, but I just kind of pick up the pace. Um, and move through things more quickly. If I see that, we started an activity and they were able to do it right off the bat, it was not a challenge, I keep it short, I move to the next activity. So this is speed. Importantly, that speed is always gauged by how the mastery is going. It's not coming from my desire to stick to a calendar or my feeling that this shouldn't be this hard or something like that. It is still attuned to the students. So, um, picking up the speed, doing a little bit less repetition, a little bit less spiraling because the mastery is there is one really easy adaptation. Doesn't require any additional prep. Hopefully your unit was prepped ahead of time. You just make adjustments to your calendar. The second way that I adapt is, and possibly in addition to speed, is enrichment. I add more new things that we're going to touch on. Every single authentic project-based language immersion unit has a whole bunch of tangents, a whole bunch of directions it can go because they are interdisciplinary and they are based in real life. You can go down a rabbit hole about anything in real life. If you don't believe me, please visit the internet. You can go deep, 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 deep on literally any topic. So within the unit that you're planning on doing, you can choose a direction that seems like it might be interesting or challenging to your students, and you can pursue that more. That applies to lots of things. So I'll give you one example. In our scavenger hunt unit, it's usually our second unit, extremely basic. It's the novice low unit, novice low to novice mid unit. Well, we usually have them do a scavenger hunt for extremely common objects like a hill, a leaf, a rock, a, a river, those kind of things, because they don't know that vocabulary yet. And we're not only introducing all that super basic vocabulary because they will need it because they are alive and they need to speak the language, but also we're spending a lot of that unit focusing on simple prepositions, position words. Is behind, is near to, is far from, those kind of things. Like that's all new. So the unit is really heavy in that. But if a student comes to the unit with partial or total mastery of all that and moves through that very quickly and they got it, no problem. We created an expansion pack or an enrichment pack for the scavenger hunt unit where they actually go on the same scavenger hunt. And in one example, they go to the same place, which is a wetlands near the school. But instead of looking for really basic things that they already know the words for, they look for more complicated things. We introduce a bunch more words, and we also introduce a bunch more verbs. When I say a bunch, I mean 7 to 15 more verbs so that they can talk about their experience with more precision. So, for example, we learn not just I saw, but I discovered, or I noticed, or I sat and observed, or took a sample from, or I harvested some. Like they talk about their experience in a more rich way. And then what they can identify is also enriched. And that went all the way up some additional words of common things, like we added in insects and stumps, sometimes is in the original one, sometimes is an add-on. Um, Bird houses that would have been added to a wooded area, nests, things like that, instead of just saying birds. So we built more, pretty basic, general, categorical vocabulary into it so that there were more words for them to acquire, practice, and acquire, and they did. For those who also had a pretty easy time with that, we have another step that it can be expanded when appropriate. based on formative assessment, where they actually participated in a real life scavenger hunt that was going on an app called iNaturalist, where people were posting different species of lichen that they found. Lichen is similar to moss. It's a super interesting Google. So we did a quick rabbit hole on what is lichen, why is it important, why is it interesting, how is it similar to but different from moss? How does it grow? Like all those things involved a ton of language about lichens. And then they went out into the wetland and they found tons of lichens and they actually uploaded them to a real database that people are, nature explorers are building of the different lichen that they find in that area. And they tagged it and they described it and everything also in the focal language. That's something that educated adults are interested in and engaging in as a hobby, not because they are language learners. They're doing it in their L1, but it's still interesting. And it's an interesting little rabbit hole to go down. What are lichen? Why are they important? Where do they grow? How do they grow? And all of that was not terrifically complicated language. Like it's still, it grows here, it is located there, it looks like this, it doesn't look like that. It still was accessible to our lower proficiency learners, but it provides something that's intellectually a lot more serious and stimulating. And it's also, a new variation on what we're doing that has, requires more phrases. So that worked really well as an expand and actually a two-step expansion pack on what happens when we do our scavenger hunt map of the woodlands. We learned also about woodlands. That was another part of it, to learn about woodlands and how excuse me, I'm saying woodlands, I meant wetlands, to learn about wetlands and how they function, and to actually make a 3D model of a wetland and explain in the language. I mean, now it's a seriously challenging science project. All of that information is part of the normal scavenger hunt that we were doing in the same land. We just went down a little bit of a rabbit hole about, okay, this land is a wetland. What does that mean? Why is that important? What do we need to know about wetlands? And then can you build like a functional model of a wetland? And then also, can you identify some species of lichen and classify them in this database and talk about how they compare to what's already in the database? So those are things that are just interesting to people, regardless of language learning. So any project can sort of be scaled up like that. Many of them can also be scaled down to some extent, but they can certainly be enriched with more and more of an investigation of real life. It's just that as the curriculum developer, the teacher, you have to have a natural sense of curiosity, a natural sense of wanting to know more, having follow-up questions, wanting to put things in context, and then you will be able to enrich any project that way. So then to strategy 3, you could, of course, replace, if you have enough of the class that are equipped for a more advanced curriculum. But like, for example, the scavenger hunt we do in the fall, specifically because of the weather is so nice and students want to be outside and it helps them to explore the natural area around their school, which is really important. So we like to do it in the fall regardless of their proficiency level. So you can also just replace it with a more advanced proficiency level, right? We could have done a whole scavenger hunt just about fungi and lichen and gone deep into fungi and lichen and made a whole map of the fungi and lichen and participated in the iNaturalist app database, et cetera, et cetera. And that would have been like a science lesson with lots of sophisticated sentences in it, and it could have been at a higher proficiency level. So you can also create or implement a more advanced version of the same product, but with different criteria so that it's actually pushing students to a more advanced engagement with the effort that they're doing, with the project that they are creating. So that's an example of doing that. And then the fourth strategy, of course, rather than replacing the project for the whole group, is to divide the students into groups. I named this fourth because I think people jump to it really quickly, and I always jump to it with a lot of care. It's kind of my last choice if the other three don't work. And the reason is that it seems like a really simple solution to just put like proficiency levels with like proficiency levels, but you can often end up amplifying the challenges that you're facing, meaning because the whole group has more competent speakers, the level of challenge that they have is even less now. So they're wanting even more enrichment. And then you have other groups where there are no higher level speakers and the collective proficiency level is lower. So they're struggling even more with your original version of the project. And you've thereby widened the gap in your classroom and made it more difficult for you to address everybody's needs. So it's possible to do that. If you've really thought about it and you've decided that it's necessary and manageable for you, you can split the groups up by proficiency level and have them complete alternate tasks. That is available to you. But I would say before doing that to try to get an estimated picture, an educated guess of how much that's going to widen the gap and create like more stress and potentially more disengagement um, within the classroom by taking that approach. So then I would wonder if maybe mixed level groups isn't better. Now, another thing I often warn against is just taking your most advanced speakers and using them as teachers of the less advanced speakers. I do that with extreme care and on very rare occasions, and I don't really advocate for that. So that's not what I mean. Just stick all the higher level kids in all the groups. But having mixed level groups where part of the challenge is working together through the medium of the focal language and maintaining the academic expectations and the rigor of the project is can be an enriching experience for everybody. The higher proficiency and lower proficiency can gain a lot from being in that role, either how to ask questions, how to answer them, how to create explanations in the language, how to ask for clarification in the language, but also how to express things in a simpler way and in a more advanced way along the same ideas. So it is possible to move your entire class to a more advanced version of your project. You may decide you want to move some groups to a more advanced version of the project, but I just recommend that you seriously think that through. Don't just jump to that because it can potentially create a lot more work for you because they don't have each other to help on their projects, and they may end up working on really different things. And it can also in either the group can encourage the higher level speaker to carry the lower level speaker in a way that isn't necessarily constructive, or separating them can enforce ideas of them being separate, being people who don't need to live and function together, and can actually erode the long-term class culture and solidarity because they're not being expected to support and encourage one another and help each other build skills. They're being encouraged to just go off with their own level, and there's a sense of arrogance or worthlessness or whatever that might arise within them because of that. So I choose strategy number 4 with great care, but it is, of course, available. So with a little bit of extra prep, which if you're using the Alive curriculum, that extra prep is generally already available for you within the units. You can pretty easily dial a project-based language immersion unit up or dial it down a little bit. And when properly implemented, this concern becomes a lot less because it's fewer students who have the concern, and the concern isn't urgent and immediate, like I can't engage in this class right now until you serve me personally. It's much more that it's interesting to participate, but over time they may notice that they need more support. So I hope this helps.